We all know that the economy needs some help. Everyone agrees that we need lots more good, stable jobs to rebuild our communities and to be able to invest in our future. But some people are taking advantage of this situation. All too often, economic development is driven by large corporations with no loyalty to our communities. These corporations play on local governments' fears about jobs. They demand subsidies in what some have called economic development blackmail. Take Boeing, for instance. In 2013, Boeing threatened to move production of its new airplane away from Seattle, where it had been founded almost 100 years ago. The company wasn't hurting. At the time, it was enjoying a surge in profits with a record backlog of $400 billion in orders. But they knew that the threat of job loss would make local officials eager to please. With other states eagerly offering their own packages of incentives and subsidies, Boeing was able to squeeze $8.7 billion in tax breaks out of the state of Washington over the next 16 years. Let's put that number in perspective. That's $1.7 billion more than the state spends on schools in an entire year. As one Seattle council person put it, the company held not only Boeing workers, but the entire state's economy hostage to their endless desire for profits. Noting that it was the largest state tax giveaway in the nation's history, the publisher of Governing Magazine and the former mayor of Kansas City, Mark Funkhauser, wrote that it illustrated the bankruptcy of the current approach to economic development. Nationwide, we spend $80 billion every year on these kinds of corporate incentives. In many cases, it's clear that the corporations are simply playing cities off against each other to drive up profits. Like when Kansas City, Missouri, and Kansas City, Kansas, waste millions of dollars to pull companies from one side of the river to another, a practice business leaders have criticized as a senseless economic border war. Taxpayers in both cities lose, and the absentee stockholders and top executives of the corporations, the 1%, win. Is there an alternative to this broken model of economic development? Actually, there is, and it's called community wealth building. Community wealth building is about inclusiveness. It's aiming to create broad-based economic security for the 99%. Like when a group of employee-owned cleaning companies in San Francisco creates quality, secure jobs for Latina women, because they own their own company. Community wealth building is about recognizing and cultivating local assets. Among the great assets of towns and cities across the country are local anchor institutions, like not-for-profit hospitals and universities who are not going to pick up and move away. Cultivating these local assets might mean encouraging them to buy more locally, like University Hospitals in Cleveland did when it spent over $1 billion expanding its medical centers. Instead of following the business-as-usual script, it spent over 90% of its contract dollars with locally owned companies in Northeast Ohio and created contract opportunities for over 100 minority and women-owned businesses. Community wealth building is also about working collaboratively. Instead of sitting around waiting for someone else to rebuild their neighborhoods, people come together to create the solutions they need, like they did in the Dudley Street neighborhood of Boston, where residents worked with the city government to acquire vacant properties through a community land trust, revitalizing their neighborhood from the ground up by eliminating blight and creating hundreds of affordable homes, parks, playgrounds, and gardens. Community wealth building is about building institutions that benefit the community over the long term, like the state-owned Bank of North Dakota. Because the state bank supports locally owned banks, there are more community banks per capita in North Dakota than anywhere else in the nation. This is one way the Bank of North Dakota, together with those community-owned banks, helped keep the state healthy in the financial crisis of 2008. Even as the big Wall Street banks nearly crashed the economy and shut down lending elsewhere. Because the people of North Dakota own their own state bank, they benefit every year when it returns millions of dollars from its surplus back to the state government, which can use those funds to do essential things like support public schools and build public infrastructure. In the end, community wealth building is about local control and ownership. It's about Latina women having secure jobs because they own their company. It's about the people of North Dakota having a thriving economy because together they own a big state bank. It's about the people of Dudley Street being able to take control over vacant land in their neighborhoods so they can create affordable housing and avoid displacement. It's about taking back our economy from the 1% and reclaiming it for the 99%. It's about developing local economies where we can prosper and thrive because they're our economies. By focusing on inclusion, working collaboratively, cultivating local assets, and building new institutions, we can create economies we own and control and build community wealth for all of us.